You lose at chess because you think about the wrong things. There are two things that strong chess players are focused on when they play chess. If you're gonna change your mindset and think about the right stuff when you play chess, you're immediately gonna become a much stronger chess player. In this video, I'm gonna share with you exactly what you must focus on for move number 1 to beat your very next opponent. What's up, chess player, and welcome to the Journey to Grandmaster, the place where you can improve every single aspect of your chess game. And today we are gonna play against Antonio. Antonio is 1500 rated player guy, and let's start the game. So the point is, I want to explain you what you have to think throughout the game from the move 1. There are two key principles I want you to know. First of all, you must always focus on the most active opportunity you can do at this particular moment. It's like every single move you must think, okay, what is the most active move I can do now? And I'm gonna share you the system how you can find it. And then the second principle is whenever your opponent makes a move, you must always think, what is my opponent's idea? Because you never play chess alone, so many players are making this mistake. So just focusing on these two things, if you do it correctly, should be enough to beat a 1500 rated opponent. Now, it's a theory. Let me prove it to you on this practical example. So we are starting as white, we are making our first move. What is the most active thing we can do right now? There are three things that are important in the opening. Forget about everything else. Focus on the center because this is the most important part of the board where all of the parties are happening, so you don't want to miss it. Second, you want to bring all of your pieces into the game. You want no unemployment happening in your camp. You want everybody to join the party and make something useful for you. And finally, you want to bring your king into safety. This is like your child that you need to care about. You just need to make sure everything is all right with it before you can go all in into the war with your chess opponent. Okay, having that in mind, let's start our game. The first move, I want to focus on the center, so I'm playing d4 because it's controlling a lot of squares in the center. At the same time, it's opening up my pieces. The queen has now more prospects, the bishop has some squares to go. So this is how you start the game. Then I come up with the second idea, which is developing my pieces. I bring my knight towards the center, because remember, center is the most important thing in the most important part on the chess game, so I do that. My opponent plays c5. And remember this key rule, it applies to the whole chess game starting from move 1. What's your opponent's idea? So here my opponent plays the move c5, he is putting pressure on my d4 pawn. Whether the next question you should ask yourself whether it's dangerous for you, because maybe he has an idea, but it's not a problem for you at all, then not necessarily you need to do something about it. If, however, you make a conclusion, yes, that's a problem for me, then you need to do something about it. For example, for me, c takes d seems like an unpleasant move to face, because if I have to take it with the knight, then my opponent is gonna play e5 and attack my knight, and he's gonna control the whole center, whereas I'm losing so many tempi with the single knight on f3. Remember, please, time is the most precious resource in chess, so you don't want to lose any second or any move. The golden principle is one move, one piece. So not a single piece should move twice before all of the pieces are developed. This is the best case scenario. Of course, your opponent might attack you and then you have to spend another tempo, but voluntarily, in the best case scenario, you should never do that. So what do we do with this move c5? Well, we can make some fancy moves like the move c4, but we are not playing any fancy chess here. 1500, it's completely enough to beat the opponent of this level without making any fancy moves. But we are gonna just play e3. We're gonna continue our development, and at the same time, we deal with our opponent's threat. This is something you always want to do, a multi-purpose move. The move that is at the same time doing something great for you and stops your opponent's idea, for example. Our opponent plays knight to c6, which is a very normal move. He's developing everything towards the center. Absolutely no problem with that. Okay, let us continue the development. I would say the simplest move here is bishop to e2. Now, bishop to d3 is completely normal in this type of structure, but in this particular case, I don't want his bishop to come to g4 and somehow annoy me. But okay, it's too much into the detail, not that important. Bishop d3 would also be completely fine if you play that. Just focus on the development. Every single move, try to bring a new piece into the game. I hope it's not a complicated concept, but if you're gonna do that, it's gonna help you so much, because so many players, they're doing that exactly as Antonio, our opponent, is doing here. They are just developing a few of their pieces and then try to attack with it immediately. Don't develop your queen too early, because the queen can be attacked and you don't want that, because then you need to spend yet another tempo with the same piece. To illustrate that, let me take this pawn on c5, because now my opponent needs to make a second move with the same piece that has already been developed, which is the queen in this case, and that means he's wasting time. And we are ahead in terms of the development, because we can, for example, just castle here immediately, and we have already achieved one of the very important goals in the opening. Now we have this queen in the center of the board, which we might focus on creating pressure. So our opponent plays bishop g4. Apart from these weird queen moves, he's actually doing completely normal stuff, but let's try to explore it. How can we do it? Well, remember, we still need to finish our development because we are far from it. How can we do that? I want to develop this bishop. Now, you need to find the most active squares for all of your pieces. It's essential not only to bring them somewhere, but to make sure they have some actual job to do. I really want my dark square's bishop to be on this diagonal, this long diagonal where the bishop would control so many squares. And remember about the center. The bishop is quite a weird piece. It could stay on the side of the board, but at the same time control the central squares here, e5 and d4. So to achieve that, I want to place my bishop on b2, but there is a pawn standing here on b2, so I can just move it and play b3. But if I think a little bit about what my opponent is doing, he's placing his queen on c5, which is weird, so I want to attack it. So I want to combine two ideas. I want to attack my opponent's queen so that he wastes yet another tempo, and I want to finish my development, bring the bishop to b2. How do I do that? Well, I play the move a3, which prepares the move b4, which attacks the queen and opens up the b2 square for my bishop. Hopefully that was not too difficult to follow. My opponent plays knight to f6, and that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm winning a tempo here, and the queen has to make the third move in the first 8 moves of the game. This is absolutely not what you want to achieve. This is the opposite of what you should be aiming in your games. I am playing, meanwhile, bishop to b2. And now I'm already controlling a lot of space on the queen side. I'm already having a very good bishop. I'm just one minor piece away from finishing my minor pieces development, which is also very good. And my opponent, I don't know what he's doing with the queen here. Yes, it helps to play e4 maybe, but then this queen is somehow vulnerable and I can continue attacking it. For example, now I really like the move h3. That would attack my opponent's bishop and he needs to decide something. What do you do with it? Either you exchange it, but then I'm gonna get a 2 bishops advantage, which is always very nice, or he needs to spend yet another tempo. Going back is the worst thing you can do. But yeah, so many low-rated players are doing that, and you need to know how to take advantage of that, and of course, never do that in your own games. The golden principle is never go back. This is the Bobby Fischer's rule. Of course, there are always exceptions. I mean, every single principle I teach you in chess and everybody else is teaching you in chess has exceptions. This is why chess is complicated. But in 99% of the cases, that's gonna help you outplay everybody on your level. So bishop c8 is a bad move. Why? Because his position basically hasn't changed in those 2 tempi, bishop g4 and bishop c8, but we have done so many useful things for ourselves in the meantime. Now I just want to bring my last minor piece into the game, so I'm gonna play knight d2. This is a better square for the knight because on c3 it's gonna block my own bishop. I don't want to do that. He plays e5, okay, he makes an active move, although his play is a little bit inconsistent. Why do you play g6 first to play e5 second? Because now this diagonal is quite vulnerable. Anyway, I want to create some counterplay. Remember, the third thing that is very important in the opening is fighting for the center. So I guess it's time for me to do that because, well, I have developed more pieces than my opponent did. His bishops are still there. So that means I have the development lead and I have to use it. Because this is the type of advantage you cannot just wait forever. Your opponent is going to make 2 moves, bishop g7 castles. By the way, that's another advantage. We have already castled, whereas our opponent's king is in the center still, which is great, but we have to use it. Otherwise, he's going to play bishop g7, castles, the advantage is gone. So how do we use it? Well, we start with the most active opportunities. Remember, that was the number one thing that you must always focus on in your game. What is the most active move I can make right now, and whether it's good for me? To help you find the most active move, I have a 4-step formula for you to find it. Checks, captures, threats, and active moves. You're going through these 4 steps at every single turn and try to find your best move. Now, I haven't mentioned it before because in the opening, normally you don't have that many check opportunities, not that many captures. You just want to bring all of your forces into the battlefield. But starting from this point, you already feel, yeah, okay, maybe my king is in the center, I can put some pressure. I have already some pieces to play with. Maybe I can capture something, maybe this e5 pawn. How many attackers do I have? I have 1, 2. My opponent has 2 defenders. Okay, I cannot take it. Threats. Threats is maybe something a little bit complicated for players because like checks, captures, clear, but what is a threat? A threat basically means that you want to do something very dangerous to your opponent the very next move. For example, you attack the queen. That means that if he does nothing about it, next move you're gonna take the queen. This is the threat. Now I want to play c4 because I want to fight for the center and I want to create a threat of taking the d5 pawn. When your king is in safety, but your opponent's king is in the center still, then you want to open up the center. That would allow you to attack it. Okay, our opponent is making this third move with the bishop. I guess he could have done it immediately. Although this is questionable because I'm gonna continue my idea. By the way, never forget why you made your move. So many players, they're just making one move. The very next turn, they completely forget about what they wanted to do initially. Always focus on what you wanted to do, but as long as your opponent makes a move, forget about all of your plans for just 1 second and think what he wants to achieve. Because yes, maybe you can still take this pawn, but he is attacking your queen. For example, my queen would be on c2 now. Then you can just not ignore it, and you make 99% of all of your blunders. The reason why you lose at chess because you're not checking your opponent's idea. So please do that. Just one thing would improve your elo level so much. Okay, bishop f5, I have checked it. It doesn't create any check opportunities. It's not really threatening to capture anything. It's not attacking anything, so I'm not afraid of it. Then I can continue with my idea, which is c takes d. Of course, I'm not winning anything because I have only one attacker and he has 2 defenders. But I'm opening up the center. Remember, it's always great when your opponent's king is in the center. Yes, he takes with the queen because if he takes with the knight, then immediately we can win a piece with the move e4. Now, of course, we must check the move e4 because that is a potential fork to win a piece. But we need to calculate. Always, that's the simplest thing you can do. Whenever you move your pieces, you should just check whether this piece that you're moving can be taken or not. This one principle alone would save you from so many troubles. So e4, how many attackers my opponent has? 1, 2, 3. I have only one defender. That doesn't work. As simple as that. What else can I do? Well, I like to attack this queen. Remember, I told you that the queen in the center is not really a good piece in the opening. Why? Because it can easily be attacked by your opponent's pieces. In this case, the opponent is me, and I want to attack this queen. So I'm playing bishop to c4. I'm improving my bishop. By the way, notice this is the first moment in the game I'm making the second move with the same piece that was developed before. Of course, you can say, okay, that's fine, I can just bring my rook instead, rook to c1. You are going to be absolutely fine with that. That is a very good move. Like, there is almost nothing bad you can do by bringing a new piece into the game. That is why I really recommend you always and always focus on it. But bishop c4 just seems like a good chance to use my opponent's mistakes, to use the fact that he's so slow with his development. Okay, so I'm attacking the queen. Queen has to spend yet another tempo. I guess it's already 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth move with the queen, and we are only on move 14 in the entire game. I mean, this is so super slow. You can never do that. Now, of course, you remember, first of all, we think what our opponent can do. Well, the queen is kind of looking at this diagonal here. Maybe he wants to sacrifice on h3 and then try to create some checkmating attacks. But remember about the general chess principle. Normally, you never want to attack with your king in the center, because that's going to be very dangerous for it. And secondly, he's just not ready for it. He hasn't fully mobilized his pieces to be able to launch a very strong attack. So I'm not really scared of it. If you are, you can check more carefully the variation that can happen there, whether he has enough resources. But I'm gonna go ahead and think about my most active opportunities. Checks, captures, threats. The only check I have here is bishop takes f7, but I don't have enough defenders for it. He's gonna just capture and I'm gonna be bishop down. I don't want that. Then what can I capture? Well, apart from the f7 pawn, I can also capture the e5 pawn. I have two attackers for it and my opponent has only one defender, so it seems like a very lucrative option for me. Let's calculate the variation. I'm gonna play knight takes e5 because I never want to exchange the bishop for a knight. I mean, in general, this bishop is so great along this diagonal, but just in principle, you never want to exchange your bishop for a knight in the open position without a very, very good reason to do that. If you're getting something really great after the exchange, then that might be a good reason. For example, in this particular position, taken with the bishop might not be that stupid, because if he takes with the knight, I just continue the variation, I take it back with the knight, and it's a double attack. I'm attacking this guy on d7 and the pawn on f7, and it's not possible to save both of them. But I still don't want to take with the bishop somehow, because my opponent can just ignore it, play bishop g7, and then my bishop would be constantly hanging. And it's also kind of a fancy move. We don't want to make fancy moves. Simple move is we see a pawn that we can win, we calculate the variation, our opponent doesn't have enough defenders, he doesn't have any threats afterwards, and so we go for it, we just take the pawn. Once again, if you prefer instead to focus on the developments and play something like rook c1 or queen b3, rook d1, I would never say anything bad. It's just yeah, feels like we are ahead in terms of the development, and I feel that I can use it here, so I'm doing that. As long as you are ahead in terms of the development, you can afford that. But don't try to cash in too early without a very good reason to do that. Because if you win a pawn, but your opponent can develop all of his pieces in the meantime, then it might not be a good investment for you, because, well, you're going to experience a lot of problems. Now, my opponent plays queen to c6. This is another mistake, because he is making yet another move. It seems like he wants to play with the queen his entire game. The problem is, one queen is not worth as much as all of the other pieces combined, and we can use that to our advantage. Now, back to the development, I want to bring all of my pieces, and I want to find the most active squares for it. This rook is not participating in the game at all, and now I want to bring it to c1, which is a multi-purpose move. First of all, it's an open file. Remember, the rooks love the open files. And secondly, okay, b5, that's such a weird move. And secondly, I create a threat for my opponent that he completely ignores here, namely bishop takes f7 check. So my opponent haven't thought, what is your opponent's idea? Every single time your opponent makes a move, try to stop and think what he wants to achieve. Even if it seems like, okay, he wants just to develop his piece, or he wants just to protect his bishop. No, don't think passively. Think in terms of the most active opportunities. Does this move from your opponent create any checks opportunities, any captures, any threats potential for you? And every time you have the rook on the same file with your opponent's queen, that's a good thing for you and a bad thing for your opponent. Try to look for a way to use it. Right now, I have only one check available, and I must start my decision-making process with this check. Why? Because if you're not going to do that, then you're going to miss so many incredible opportunities, and you're not going to win so many chess games. If you're going to do that, then chances are, if there is a check, you calculate it, and it appears to be a good move, you're not going to miss it. So it's so great. Bishop takes f7 is a check here. The king has to do something about it. Of course, the most active move is to take this bishop, but then we're just winning the queen completely. So that's a perfect variation for us to do. Why the check is so superior to everything else you can do on the chessboard? Because your opponent cannot ignore it. Even if you attack the queen of your opponent, maybe your opponent can attack your king, create a checkmate threat, and then he doesn't care about the queen. But if you attack his king, he has absolutely zero ways to ignore it, and he has to react to it. So you paralyze basically his entire position, which happens in this case, and that allows me to win the queen. Now, why this opening disaster happened to my opponent? Because he made so many moves with the same piece. Remember, one piece, one move. If you're gonna do that, something like that would never happen to you. Okay, but even if we have an extra queen, nothing has changed. We need to bring all of our pieces into the game. Because why it matters that I have an extra queen if I don't use it? It's not the number of pieces that matters on the chessboard, but the number of active pieces that participate in the game. So I really want to develop my queen. What is the most active square for it? Well, the one where it gives a check, because you remember that's the most active opportunity we always have in the position. So I can combine developing with giving a check by playing queen to b3, and our opponent has once again to react passively on it. And now, just for the sake of instructive purposes, of course, there are so many moves winning immediately, but I really want to bring my last piece into the game, and of course, open file, rook to c1. This is a beautiful instructive moment. Now I'm ready maybe to double along the 7th rank, because this is the best rank to have your rooks on. My opponent plays rook d8, and I forget for a second about my plans and think, okay, what my opponent wants to achieve. He wants to take my knight on d2. He's attacking it, creating a threat. Is it dangerous for me? Yeah, I don't really want to lose my knight. Now, I can make a offensive move, create a counter threat and attack his bishop. But remember, for this level, it's not necessity. You can just make normal moves. Your opponent is attacking the knight. Can we improve this knight so that we deal with this threat at the same time improve our position? Yes, we do. We have knight f3, from where it can go to d4 in the center of the board, control node of squares, or maybe to g5, near to the king, creating some troubles. Okay, our opponent continues to create threats for us. This is the right approach, but unfortunately for him, he's doing it too late. Okay, where should the queen go? Actually, if you have a lot of extra material, you always want to exchange the pieces. That is why I really like the move rook 1 to c3. There are no checks. Remember to check your opponent's opportunities before you make your move, but there are no checks, and I'm always happy to exchange, because the more pieces you exchange, the simpler it gets for you to convert your material advantage. If you have 10 pieces against 9, then you have 10% more pieces than your opponents. But if you exchange a lot of pieces and you have 2 against 1, you have twice as many pieces as your opponent. This is a huge, huge improvement. Yeah, that is why my opponent goes back here, but that means, once again, he's wasting time while we are improving our position. Okay, actually, instead of playing rook c7, yes, that's a very good move, but the rook is already active. He's attacking this knight. My knight on f3 is, however, the worst placed piece right now, and you want as many pieces to participate in your attack as possible. So I really want to bring it to the d4 square, where it controls so much, attacks the bishop, blocks the d file, and now all of my pieces are participating. This is the golden strategy that I want you to follow in every single one of your games. My opponent plays bishop d7, which is good for me because it's a move back. Every time you're moving your piece forward and you're making an active move, and your opponent has to go back and make a passive move, that's already an achievement for you. That's an improvement. Okay, what can I do now? First of all, I always start with the check. So yeah, I have here knight to e6 check opportunity, which is at the same time a fork, and I really enjoyed this move. Then, if my opponent's king is going back, then once again, I have done something active, he has done something passive, that's good, but I can also just take that rook on d8. And also notice that I pretty much don't have any unprotected pieces. This is the best way to make sure that you don't blunder anything in the position. Just as every time your opponent makes a move, think, what is the idea of this move? Now he takes the knight, but that's not the only idea. He also attacks my queen. This is very, very important. I cannot ignore it. But what I can do is just take it here on e6, and now, yeah, the threats are devastated. Why is that the case? Why my opponent is losing? Because I'm using all of my pieces to create threats for him. Okay, one check before the death doesn't really help, because I can just play king h2, because I made this h3 luft for my king to make sure that he is in safety. Always make sure your king is in safety before you launch a very dangerous attack and go all in for it. Bishop d8, it's a move back, it doesn't create any threats. What can I do? The most active opportunities, checks, captures, and threats. Well, I can at the same time give a check and capture something. This is even better. If you have like multiple checks and you don't know which one to choose, always start with the most active one, which is a capture at the same time. Or maybe it's creating a threat at the same time. That also would be a multi-purpose move. But here I have 3 attackers for the knight. He only has 2 defenders, so there is absolutely nothing stopping me from capturing that knight. King goes to h6. Okay, now the king has almost no squares to escape, so how can I give a checkmate? I really want to connect this rook because it doesn't participate yet, Yeah, I can play rook c5. Let's do that. I like this approach. All of my pieces are playing, and that is why my opponent is not able to somehow deal. He plays a5. This is amazing. Okay. Maybe just queen to f7. That creates queen g7 checkmate threat in one. I don't have any reasonable checks immediately. I don't have any reasonable captures, so I'm doing that. Now he takes. Yeah, let's continue taking. Now I have three major pieces here, attack and one little king. That should be more than enough to give him a checkmate. Imagine how cool it would be to play chess without ever having opening troubles again. What if I told you I could teach you all openings you will ever need in just 10 days? You get lifetime access to more than 110 pure value video tutorials, almost 100 practical tasks to apply your knowledge immediately into practice, 30 plus bonus videos to dive 10 times deeper, as well as private community where all questions you might ever have are answered daily. Get a $200 limited time discount with the link in the description and forget about all opening pain once and for all. Okay, let's try to calculate that. What kind of checks we have? We have queen g7, queen h7, doesn't work, our opponent is gonna take it. We have rook takes g6, doesn't work, our opponent is gonna take it, and I don't see a very good follow-up. But we also have rook to h5, and that one seems to be interesting. Our opponent cannot take with the pawn, he must take with the king, the only move. Then queen takes h7, into g5, and we can take the g6 pawn. That must be a checkmate. It's a little bit fancy here, but we can allow us that we have a full extra queen, so we can calculate a few moves variation. Of course, it's not necessary. We could have just played, I don't know, g4 and prepare a checkmate threat in one, but I want to show something nice to you in the end here. Let's take this guy. He has to play king g5, and then we take on g6. The only move is king to h4. And finally, we deliver a checkmate with queen to g4. So this is the complete strategy, what you should focus on during your chess game to beat every single one of your opponents on the 1500 level and below. I hope this video was valuable to you, and if it's a little bit too advanced, then in this video I have prepared for you absolutely everything you must know at 1000 elo rating. This one video will stop you from hundreds of painful losses.